I am shaken by the resignation of General Mattis for what it means to our country, for the message it sends to our troops, and for the indication of what his view is of the Commander-in-Chief.
The combination of the abrupt resignation of Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis and the president's temper tantrum over the wall has lent Washington a distinct air of panic and worry these last 2 days. But while the president watches cable news and tweets and we hurtle towards a shutdown, Democrats in the House are preparing to govern for the first time in 8 years and are inheriting a country that feels like it's on the precipice of real, honest-to-God crisis. One of the people who'll be taking over the gavel and taking on the mantle is my next guest, Democratic Congressman Jerry Nadler of New York. Heady times for you, Congressman, as you're about to take this over. First, on the shutdown, if there's no deal, what's the plan? Like, the first day that you get the gavel and the Democrats running the House will be with a shutdown government.
Well, the plan is to open up the government, but that requires the president to deal reasonably, and the president is not being rational now at all. He obviously feels abandoned. All the people are abandoning him. The wheels are coming off the bus, whether it's the voters who abandoned him in large numbers, gave a great victory to the Democratic Party, or all the people around him who are testifying to Mueller and turning state's evidence, his campaign manager, his deputy campaign manager, his national security advisor, his secretary of defense who resigned, his chief of staff who resigned, and now Fox News and the conservative talk radio, he feels very beleaguered, and that's why I think he's turning to his base. Every time he feels beleaguered, he turns to his base to try to do something that will rally them to him, and that's what this wall fight is all about. It's purely him trying to rally some support from his base, which is otherwise deserting him.
You're going to take over the Judiciary Committee, and it will be the first time there's any real oversight exercise in the Trump era. And one prime concern is the acting Attorney General of the United States, who is not Senate confirmed, despite the fact he has had that position now for a while. He has decided unilaterally to not recuse himself from oversight of the Mueller probe, despite the fact that he's said all these things about it. He created this very convoluted process. In his letter, he says, after completing his review and considering all relevant views, which was the professionals in the ethics department and his other pals, the acting Attorney General has decided not to recuse himself from the special counsel investigation. What are you going to do about that?
Well, the first thing we're going to do, first of all, he has to recuse himself. The professionals told him so. They at first lied about it, and then they came clean later today, later yesterday, saying that that he had decided to ignore their advice and to assemble this ad hoc committee of non-professional ethics people, of non-professional people, to give him the advice he wanted. And it's crystal clear that he's put there for the purpose of sabotaging the Mueller investigation. And that's why he can't recuse himself, because the president doesn't want him to. And that's why the president got rid of Sessions, whose only sin was recusing himself. Now, we had a conversation with Chairman Cummings of the Oversight Committee, and I had a conversation with him about 2 weeks ago, following a number of letters. And he agreed to come before my committee in January to testify about this and other questions, and we agreed to that, and he agreed to that. Now they've been backtracking. They won't agree to a date. They won't agree to a time. So we sent the letter. I sent the letter to him today, demanding that he set up a time and a date in January when he can appear before our committee. And I said that I hope we didn't have to use compulsory process to bring him there, but if we have to, we will.
Wait, so they're now trying to not? I mean, you're the Oversight Committee. You're the appropriators for that department, if I'm not mistaken. You set the budget and stuff like that. Like he's got to show up, right?
Well, he should show up, and we will subpoena him if we have to. They have not said they won't show up. He said he would in this conversation with us 2 weeks ago, but we cannot pin them down to a date and a time.
So,
and they seem to be backtracking on that.
Do you think that they're just going to ride that out till then? I mean, it seems to me like he learned his lesson from Sessions. It's obvious why he's there for the reasons you indicate, and they basically feel like they can get away with it indefinitely.
Well, he can't get away with not appearing before the committee indefinitely because we'll subpoena him.
Right.
And he has to respond to that, and he will. I'd rather he come before the committee on a less compulsory basis, but he will come before the committee, and we will ask him these questions, and we'll take whatever necessary measures we think appropriate.
How do you?
And we will on the related matter, we will, as one of the first orders of business in January, report out of the committee and pass the House the protective legislation to protect the Mueller investigation.
So that's a priority. You know, as we were in break, I was looking at you up here on the screen, and I've known you and interviewed you over the years for quite some time. And you now find yourself at sort of a pivotal moment, a kind of fulcrum of history. I mean, you were the chair of the Judiciary Committee in 2019 in a year when some very important things and matters of the greatest constitutional and historical import can come for your committee. Like, how are you thinking about your role right now?
I'm thinking about my role that I have a job to do, and that job is to protect the rule of law, to vindicate the rule of law, and to protect the United States insofar as we can against the anti-democratic impulses of Trump and his administration. We see this anti-democratic movement in many places around the world, and the president's allied himself with tyrants in other places. We have to make sure that democratic processes work here, that the rule of law is paramount, that no one is above the law, and that is what we're going to do.
All right, Congressman Jerry Nadler, incoming chair of the Judiciary Committee. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.